After being relentlessly attacked by German forces in World War II, the drained and depleted Red Army was amazingly able to rally its troops and defeat their powerful adversary. The Russians' comeback was mainly due to German error. The Germans invaded Russia with a larger force and expected an easy victory, but their arrogance blinded them and allowed the Russians to overpower them. Had the Germans considered the possibility of not defeating the Red Army very easily, and had they been more prepared, the outcome of the German invasion of Russia may have been different. During World War II, German dictator Adolf Hitler set a goal of conquering as much of Europe as possible. After defeating Czechoslovakia, the Germans began planning an attack on Poland despite being opposed by France and Great Britain. By signing a non-aggression pact with Russia, Germany was guaranteed a one-front war against France for the time being. Once the territory of Poland was split between Russia and Germany, all of Europe knew that they would eventually fight. Hitler even expressed this by saying to the League of Nations Commissioner Karl Jacob Burckhardt, "Everything I undertake is directed against the Russians. If the West is too stupid and blind to grasp this, then I shall be compelled to come to an agreement with the Russians, beat the West, and then after their defeat turn against the Soviet Union with all my forces." On June 22, 1941, the German army invaded Russia in the beginning of an attack known as Operation Barbarossa. The powerful German force was split up into three groups known as Army Group North, South, and Central. They easily defeated the disorganized Russian army by using their well-known blitzkrieg strategy, capturing 290,000 Russian troops in the first battle alone. After suffering this massive blow, the Russian military was forced to regroup. With their entire southwestern border surrounded, very few men were able to escape after this horrific battle. Though this battle was considered a great victory for the Germans, with their capturing of over 600,000 Red Army soldiers, the Battle of Kiev could also be considered a turning point for Russia. The German High Command ordered the destruction of Kiev and all Russian forces around the area instead of marching directly to Moscow. The smarter move by Germany, if they wanted to completely wipe out the Russian army, would have been to focus solely on Moscow. This over-aggressive decision to wipe out everything in sight cost Germany time and resources and would eventually prove itself to be a disadvantage. Since the Red Army had gained time through the Battle of Kiev, they were able to regroup and re-strategize in Moscow. After slaughtering and destroying the Russians at Kiev, the German force was exhausted and not well enough supplied to continue their campaign to Moscow, so the invasion seemed to be at a standstill. With only 800,000 soldiers remaining to defend their country, this was a vital moment for Russia to regroup and mount a counterattack. Throughout the autumn of 1941, Russia was constantly rebuilding its army by sending fresh soldiers from Siberia and the far eastern coast to Moscow. Though Germany was heavily armed and very well trained, there were simply too many Russians. The now enormous and well-equipped army was so ready for battle that they launched an offensive against the Germans. On December 5, 1941, the Russians mounted an attack on the German lines around Moscow and were able to take back a 500-mile front encompassing 19 Russian armies. There were two main reasons for the successful Russian counterattack at Moscow: the time of year that the battle took place and new weapons. The Russians had a huge advantage over the Germans due to the Germans' unpreparedness for the harsh Russian winters. The Germans had neither the equipment nor the rations that they needed to be able to fight and survive in the harsh weather. The Russians were able to use this to their advantage by attacking the Germans from skis while traveling down the mountains near Moscow. The Russians were also able to defeat the Germans more easily thanks to the new weapons that they had acquired. With the arrival of heavily armored T-34 tanks, the Russians were able to deal heavy blows to the Germans while taking little to no damage on their end. The Russians' efficiency in producing their new weapons also meant that the Germans could not keep up with the firepower they brought to the battlefield. The counterattack continued to go successfully even after Moscow was taken. The Russian forces were able to recapture several major towns, taking back much-needed outposts and command points. However, an attack on the German base in Dorogobuzh was unsuccessful in the spring of 1942. This was a sure sign that summer was coming and the Russian advantage of the cold winter was wearing off. As the Germans were able to fight again, they were able to move as far into Russia as Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad began on August 23, 1942, and was the biggest battle on the Eastern Front, taking the lives of 841,000 people. The Russians began the battle by executing Operation Uranus, a mission that involved cutting off the flow of supplies to German artillery units and eventually allowed Russia to capture 300,000 German troops in Stalingrad. The Russians continued this way until the Germans finally surrendered after losing 70% of their soldiers. In the summer of 1943, Hitler continued his assault on the Russians by attacking the Russian city of Kursk. Kursk was one of Russia's most heavily armed cities and was fully equipped with hidden anti-tank mines, anti-air guns, and artillery. The sheer amount of equipment the Russians had was scary for any of Russia's enemies. Hitler eventually launched an offensive against Kursk on July 5, 1943. Little did the Germans know that the Russians had already caught word of their planned attack using spies and were now able to be prepared and were able to stop the tank offensive, though they suffered losses themselves. The Russians managed to persevere through the difficult battle and were able to subdue the powerful German force. Transportation was another key factor which allowed the Russians to triumph over the Germans. They were able to ship supplies quickly and efficiently all throughout the Eastern Front because of their incredible railway system. This was crucial in their victories over the Germans because they were never short of supplies. Anything from ammo to tanks was able to be delivered throughout Russia in a very short period of time, giving the Russians an edge over the Germans, who had to wait much longer whenever they were in need of any supplies. Through this transportation system, the Russians were able to outlast almost any opponent they faced in the West. The German army invaded Russia with the expectation that they would have a quick victory, but they severely underestimated the capability of the Russian army. The Red Army's organized leadership, supportive allies, and overall preparedness for war meant that they were easily able to defeat the arrogant, overconfident German force.